Hey
What's
man,
up?
how are
Can you
you?
hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Finally,
Awesome. I
such a
know, I know.
pleasure. Thanks for taking the
Takes,
time. I really do appreciate it. I know
of
how
course,
busy
man.
you are,
So,
and how hectic your schedule probably is, right? Here's
yeah,
that.
it's kind of like when you get down to the dentist appointment and they're like 6 months from now on a Monday at 5 a.m. Are you going to be available? And it's like, sure, whatever. Write it down. I won't know until 6 months from now. But
Yeah, I can see, man. But anyway, thanks for
of
taking the time again, and it's such a pleasure. So I
course,
don't
of
want to
course.
waste your time, of course. So let's begin, right?
Sure. Let's
So
do it.
anyway, I wanted to talk to you about two really specific subjects. I think one is a little bit more important than the other, to tell you the truth. And I like to
Sure.
start with that one. Let's start with a banger, which is talking about the transition from natural to enhanced bodybuilding. Because at least here in Mexico, where I'm at, man, if you could see some of the practices around here, it's like people begin to train and right away they get on the cycle.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't know anything about training body, nutrition, nothing
Yeah.
really. It's really, you wouldn't believe it, man.
Yeah.
But but then I came across your content a while back, when you were natty and you made a video with Dr. Mike, um, which is really interesting because you talked about your whole career as a natural
Yeah.
bodybuilder, which is about 10 years, right? Something like that.
Mhm. Yep.
Which to me it was mind blowing at the time because it's not something you see right here. So I
Right.
wanted to
Right.
to ask you how can I put it? How's your view on someone that begins to train, that is
Yeah.
serious about bodybuilding, but not to the point of just start right away with PEDs?
Sure.
Can you
Sure.
talk about a little bit
Um,
your experience, Jared?
yeah, yeah. So I'm unsure and sorry, I lost my voice like 4 weeks ago and I still don't have it back
Don't worry,
from
man.
getting sick. But I'm unsure of the natural federations in Mexico, if there are any,
Sure.
or if people, I know a few competitors from Tijuana that have crossed over into California, competed in like WNBF shows and things like that. I don't know many of the federations over there. But if there are natural federations, natural bodybuilding is a really cool way to start off in the bodybuilding ether, especially as a younger competitor. I'm not a fan of people who, like you said, they sort of just jump on stuff right away. It happens over here all the time too. Um, and you'll see it a lot in the old bodybuilding gyms. Like, some older guys, like, oh, you have a good physique here, take this trend. And then they got 19-year-olds taking
Crazy, man.
taking anabolics. It's very wild to me. Um, there's a lot to be said about taking the long approach and falling in love with the process. So if you immediately jump into, like, let's say 6 months into training, somebody's already offering you anabolics, and you immediately jump into that sort of mindset of, I have to use this thing to be better. It really almost takes a lot of the joy out of just getting better yourself. So it's like if you can train and fall in love with the process and make a lot of results as a natural bodybuilder, um, it honestly shows you what you're going to be able to do as an enhanced athlete because genetics is the biggest component in this entire sport, quote unquote sport. There are many, many great natural bodybuilders who didn't have like super crazy spherical muscle bellies, or they didn't have, um, that what you would consider bodybuilding look, and they just got super fucking lean, and they were great bodybuilders. Um, but if you gain a lot of muscle in those first couple of years of training as a natural, you kind of know where you stand as far as once you do actually hop over. So a lot of guys hop over and they don't realize that they're gonna have to take a lot more than some of the other guys do because
Sure.
they just don't have the genetics to hang. One component of genetics is that people handle drugs really well or really freaking poorly. So that is definitely a component of genetics. Um, and I'm not saying wait so you can see how you'll handle drugs. I'm saying wait to see how you can handle bodybuilding in itself because the entire process is not easy. And getting to those super, super lean levels as a natural bodybuilder, it's a lot fucking harder. Like enhanced bodybuilding has been the easiest thing ever. You have all this shit to help
Sure.
you. You're eating 400 grams of carbs all the way into fucking peak week. It's the easiest thing ever after 10 years of natural bodybuilding. Dude, I remember diets where I did 4 weeks of no fucking carbs at like 1,200 calories a day and still hardly had glute striations. You know what I mean? It's like,
Sure, man.
if you can get lean naturally and you can fall in love with that process, the process of building, the process of slowly putting on muscle, the process of slowly taking away the fat and doing it strategically with science behind your back, you're going to do a lot fucking better in the enhanced realm. You know, good genetics or bad genetics. Just waiting in general can build what's called like androgen receptor density, and you're just more, you have more affinity for the farm to work anyway. So the kids that are hopping on immediately kind of don't have that right from the get-go, and they just have to end up taking more and more and more as they transition into their career. So if you wait, you actually might be able to take a little less, and it's pretty cool because that saves your health long term. So for those of you starting out in bodybuilding, the biggest thing, and you're going to hear it all the damn time, is falling in love with the process. It's cliche as shit, but it's the truth. If you can't fall in love with the process of building muscle on your own, even when it's inching along at 2 pounds, 4 pounds a year, I don't know why you'd ever go enhance, because now you're just going to rely on the anabolics to do it for you for the rest of your career. Sure, you're going to see some pretty cool, you'll see some pretty cool gains right from the get-go, but then you have to be smarter about it. And instead of being smart right from the start, you just decided to hop on. And it's like you got to start introducing all these other compounds, and you got to get different coaches, and everybody's saying different things, and all the information out there is scarce because it's legal in only certain places. So like the
Sure.
UK, they would talk openly about it. And you know, you got a lot of people out there now. And if you really want to learn about anabolics, before you ever hop on, you should probably learn about them. I consulted with Broderick Chavez, Team Evil GSP, for about a year and a half before I ever crossed over. There are people out there like Joe Jeffrey with the Physique Collective, brilliant. John Jewett has a J3 University now. I know
Yeah.
he talks a lot with Joe Jeffrey. So these are guys that are really paving the way for that more intellectual, safer use model approach. And if you can just hold off a little longer, even, especially if you're like 19-year-old kid right now, there's advancements in Western medicine coming that might even make some of these drugs obsolete, and you won't have to risk your health as much. So it's like, just hold off. Wait a little bit.
Straight up, man. Because it's
Yeah.
crazy how some people don't even consider the variables of training and nutrition, and then hop on the crazy amount of variables you need to take into account with taking drugs. I
Yep.
mean, it really is a hazard for their health and
It is.
for other people too, for the families, friends, whatever, man.
Yeah, it's not if it's going to be hazardous, it's how much, you know. So even just, you know, taking what would be considered a low dose testosterone is it's doing something. You're probably not living as long if you hop on anabolics. It's just about a
Right,
matter of, you know, how much, how long, and what you're okay with.
right. And in your experience, Jared, what are the things you consider the most before taking the big decision? Because in to that point, you already have a 10 plus year career of lifting weights and competing as a
Sure.
natural and being on a really elite level of natural competitors. What made you take the decision, an informed decision, obviously? But what are the most important or fundamental things you took into account in your own personal experience before helping
My,
in?
my informed decision was for this exact reason. There are only 55 people watching this, but because I've done what I've done and I've crossed over and I can now speak on it, I can now help people do it
Right,
safely, do it better, or even convince them to not do it at all. Oftentimes, and this is why a lot of people get into training too, there's a lot of self work that needs to be done. And this will be more philosophical, to honestly. People want to be jacked, people want to be lean, people want to look good naked. And that is the number one reason for anabolic use, the number one reason for people being in the gym, the number one reason that personal training is even a fucking thing. Um, if you feel like you need to rely on something that is actually detrimental to your health to feel healthy, maybe reanalyze what's going on there,
right.
and you know, talk to somebody. Therapy's great. Those people who are like iron therapy and I go in there because it's fucking therapy. Like, how about you go
Um,
in there and you train intelligently for your goal, and then you talk to a therapist on the side. That might be a little smarter. And you know, we all have our days. We go in there, we're like, all right, this day is just me getting in here, and I gotta get some shit off my chest. I get it. I totally get it. But the more work you can do on yourself, the better. Introspect, talk to therapists, stuff like that. So my informed decision was because of all these things added up. I knew I was going to be a good bodybuilder. I had already won Natural Pro card. I won two, actually. I won my first ever show. I won a Physique Pro card. They just didn't give it to me. My next was a Natural Bodybuilding Pro card. And then after that, I won a Natural Pro show. Now, I went against some heavy hitters. Like, I beat Brian Miner, and he's one of the leanest dudes I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I talked to him a while back. Crazy.
Yeah. Actually, I beat him 2 weeks in a row. So I knew that I could be a good bodybuilder. And I knew I had the shape. And I had that black bubbly guy look, you know, that's my shape. I have the same sort of look, like my big delts, right. Big glutes. Like I said, you know, if you're going to be a good bodybuilder when the time comes. So I had won that Natural Pro show, and I thought about waiting another couple of years to see if I could win a world championship. And I just, you know, realized that we kind of create our own destiny and everything. I get more philosophical bullshit, but I realized my destiny is to be in the open bodybuilding world, helping people learn about this type of stuff. Even if that's just me pointing you guys in the right directions, because, you know, sometimes it is hard to sift through what's actually scientific, what's bullshit. Fortunately, I've been educated on these types of things. So it's like, I can even point you in the direction of people, since I don't know a shitload myself just yet. I learn all the time. But the people like I mentioned, like Joe and all of them, right, they at least have your best interest in mind with these safer use models. So anytime you hear somebody talking about safer use models, definitely a good person to go learn from. So my informed decision was, all right, I'm going to train as long as I can naturally, see if I can win pro card, see if I can win a pro show. And then at that point in time, when that rate of gain really starts to slow down to like, I don't actually believe in a natural limit. I don't think it exists. If all variables are accounted for, you're going to slowly gain muscle over time, all the way into the point at which your natural testosterone begins to decline and you kind of cap. I don't believe that's a natural limit. That's a physiological detriment. Like it occurs. So if you started training at 6 years old, you're going to gain muscle until you're 40.
Do you think it's still significant to the degree of a bodybuilder?
What do you mean?
The natural quote unquote limit. We can still gain muscle up to infinity, but is it still significant on a natural level?
The amount of muscle you'll gain per year?
Yeah. Or maybe in a lifetime.
It depends on how much you are consistent and diligent in your application of science.
Right.
I was gaining muscle at a rate of still like 4 pounds a year by the end of my natural bodybuilding career, and it was 10 years long. That's quite a bit.
Damn, man.
Yeah. 4 pounds on your back is 4 pounds on your back. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's nasty. It's nasty looking, man.
Yeah, it's just people are misled quite often with like the slow rate of gains and dieting for 50 fucking weeks at a time and shit like that. So that really holds a lot of people back. But you also potentiate yourself to set yourself up for a lot more in the future as far as how much muscle you can put on when you go through these longer phases. So if you're diligent, hell yeah, you can definitely put on a lot of muscle through your entire natural bodybuilding career until that natural testosterone becomes kind of a, breaking point. But
right.
So that's how I calculated mine. And I think to calculate your own, you really gotta, again, hopefully not look at training and looking good naked as a therapy. If you truly do believe, like you're a man or a woman, you truly do believe your sex appeal is going to bring you infinitely more happiness. It may not. Maybe try that without anabolics first. If your use of anabolics is strictly confined to that sort of, I would just want to be this alpha guy walking around. Again, maybe talk to somebody, maybe do some more internal work.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. And it's hypocritical of me to say don't do it because I'm doing it. But I know it's hypocritical. just because something is hypocritical does not mean it's wrong. Again, I'm doing it for a specific reason for other people. I'm not going to say it's completely selfless because I also want to be a fucking phenomenal bodybuilder. But just because I'm here and I am an educated individual, I can now help more people. So for yourself, are you going to be a high-level bodybuilder? If the answer is no, I don't know if it's worth it. Are you going to be high-level in athletics where it's okay to use? If the answer is no, I'm unsure it's okay. It's you. If you're an individual that potentially has some sort of need for any sort of hormone replacement, talk to a doctor and get that figured out. And outside of that, it's tough for me to say, hell yeah, do it. I think there's a lot more to ask yourself than just, I want to be bigger and stronger. That's cool. But there's a lot of negatives that come with anabolic use, including the fact that you can ruin your relationships. It happens all the time because people just hop on more and more and more, and they just want more. And if you're an asshole naturally, you're just you're an enhanced asshole when you're on stuff. So maybe map out those poor qualities in yourself and just understand they're going to get worse if you don't do some internal work.
Assholeness on steroids, quite literally. As you mentioned, there's this, I think it's by the American College of Sports Medicine, a position stand. It's fairly recent about why people, it's a review on the whole subject, why people decide to use steroids. And it's not really that surprisingly, but still quite curious. But it's not really competitors. It's mainly recreational lifters, and not even lifters per se, just people that, as you said, they want to look good naked, but they don't take into account the whole world of variables that is steroid usage.
Yeah. Again, it's like this one thing is going to enhance my life dramatically is the way people look at it. And that's cool. I understand. I get it, especially if you're going through some shit. But it's not always the best call. And you should definitely sit down and think a little more. And again, I'm going to put this out there as many times as I can. Therapy is great. Like if you need it, do it. It's not a bad thing.
Happy to hear it, man. The iron therapy, it's cool on Instagram. It's cool that you do all this motivation, but it's not really therapy. It's not really what a person actually needs for taking into account all these life-changing variables.
100%.
On the other end, what will happen, Jared, in your experience, in your opinion, in your informed opinion now, as you said, if someone decided to hop in a little too early? Maybe even if they want to compete, if they don't want to compete, but it's just a little too early. At least in my little experience, what I can say is terribly underwhelming for some people. That they hop in, they go into their cycle, they train, but it's not as they expected with all the due side effects.
Yeah. Sides are a big issue. But as far as hopping on too early, again, androgen receptor density and the affinity for the actual molecule to bind to a receptor is higher in somebody who is trained and has trained for a long time. Outside of that, there are probably other factors that you should take into consideration when hopping on too young. I do believe Jeffrey Physique Collective has an awesome video or information out there on Physique Collective about this. So talking points on the physiological parameters, those are really the only two that I can pinpoint directly that would make it a bad idea. So, take time to build that muscle naturally and build up, androgen density and you'll just do better in the future. Right.
Can we talk a little bit of degrees of intervention? Because for some people, steroids, it's like a unicorn, a magical unicorn, the solution to all their physique problems, the entrance to the kingdom, so to speak. But how can we begin to understand just a little bit? Because it's not really a talk that somebody would hear to get recommendations for usage. It's not really the point.
Right.
But how can we begin to talk about degrees of intervention? Orals, maybe peptides, then all the other possible stuff.
As far as when they would be introduced and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
For me to speak on that, I would say potentially bringing somebody like Joe on
Right.
would be a smart idea. Broderick would be very good at discussing this specific topic. I can really only speak to what I've done and what I know currently. And obviously, most people begin with like an HRT. And for females specifically,
Oh man.
the less AA use they can have, the better. There are other pathways in which we can stimulate anabolism. So it's like keeping chicks away. Because like this is one thing that I will put out there. Every female I know that has done anabolic starts off with Anavar, and it's probably the last thing you want to like. Not you don't want to do that. There are other ways to introduce these types of drugs into the system, and again, Joe or Broderick or somebody can talk on that in depth. I probably won't do that, but
Sure, man.
yeah. So any takeaway? Just know that if a female is being provided or suggested to use AAS as their first ever drug outside of just being natural, the coach is probably doing them a big disservice, even if it's Anavar.
Man, I've seen so many cases, even before creatine, man, to that extent, use damn creatine just as a totally cool supplement. They hop in steroids on females and on dosages that you wouldn't believe right away.
Yeah.
And not even competitors. So that's why one of the key aspects of why I wanted to talk to you directly, because of your experience with 10 years prior of training and maximizing all the variables within nutrition, within training, before even considering.
Yeah.
Very well, man. The next topic I wanted to discuss with you briefly is about monitoring health during usage, because it's a really important aspect that many people just take like, oh, let's take blood pressure from time to time and that's it. But what is the reality of a person like yourself that is really serious about their bodybuilding career and monitoring health during the process?
Yeah. Just know that your generic one-time blood work per year is probably going to go up to like 2 to 4. What a lot of people do is they'll take labs after a cycle. That's ridiculous. You should take labs peak cycle, because what you're trying to do is understand what's happening while it's introduced. So when you come off, you're obviously going to return to some level of baseline. And then people are trying to monitor from there. Okay, well, I'm healthy again, so let me go back. But all the negative health shit that happened during that cycle, you now have very minimal knowledge on what was going on. So it's very intelligent to, during a really, like, I don't know how hard people will push, or, I'm not telling anyone to be on and push hard. But depending on that, you should definitely be at your peak dosages, whatever that's going to be mid-cycle, get labs. Then you can also get labs when you do come off before you start the next one. So to see if you are returning back to normal, if there's something else going on. Outside of that, there are amazing hormone panels. There are things you should check, like long-term blood glucose, A1C. You should be checking calcium score, get an echo every now and again. Let's check the heart, because there are things that are going on that a lot of people don't check that lead to big issues. Calcium score is huge. Echocardiogram is huge. And just making sure you're getting that like basic, like there are literally, you could type in bodybuilding hormone panel and you can go to a LabCorp and get it done.
I didn't know that one.
It's that easy. It's that fucking easy. You get a slip and there you go. So just make sure you monitor all that stuff. And then in-depth analysis on this kind of stuff. Broderick has an amazing couple of videos on his member side, I believe, and just on his page. He does lives all the fucking time. Anybody watching this live, if you go follow Team Eagle GSP, he does lives like every Monday, Tuesday, something like that. I don't know. But you can literally just ask questions. He might give you some shit at first if you word your question weird, because he's kind of like that. He's kind of a dick, but I love him for it. Don't be afraid to ask questions, though. Just be like, hey, what precise test should I be getting to monitor my long-term health? He might be like, you're an idiot, and then he'll answer your question. But, he'll answer your question.
Comes with a
So
price, man, but it's worth it, right?
yeah. So don't just take what I'm saying here as like the end all be all, because there's much more.
Sure, sure,
So make
sure.
sure you're following these other sources that I'm directing you to, because all the stuff I'm saying, this is why I don't really help too many people with enhanced preps. I
Right.
don't like to tell you, hey, take this. I don't like to do milligram per kilogram dosages for people. I don't like to say, here's the form you should take, here's what you shouldn't take. I just know safer use models are the way to go, and they are honestly better, to be honest. You will have a lot less long-term side effects if you can figure this stuff out. So,
And that speaks greatly, man, of your practice because it's juggling variables that, damn, we don't even consider when we think about steroid usage as
yeah.
people that just got into the gym.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe,
there are even just weird one-off side effects that you won't even hear about, like post-injection pain.
right.
Like you can shoot a fucking quad and it can flare up for a week and a half and you can't even train your fucking legs. And the whole point of taking them was to get bigger quads. So now you're like, what the fuck am I doing to myself? You know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of shit like that people don't talk about. So you got to understand, taking farm is not easier. It makes the processes of dieting and training seem like they're easier, but at the same rate, there comes all this baggage, all this extra shit, psychologically, physically, all this extra, all these health parameters you constantly have to check. Blood pressure a couple times a week, maybe even blood glucose if you're doing like SLN and GH and things like that. So you're going to be spending a pretty penny, and you got to make sure you have the funds for it. It's not just
Right,
you're
right.
buying a vial. People hear like, oh, I'm buying a vial test. It's like $40 a month. Fuck yeah, I can do that. I can afford that. Like, no, no, no. That's not what you're going to pay for this now. And then also this and also this. Also like telmisartan blood pressure medication because it might spike your blood pressure. So yeah,
Blood
there's a
pressure
lot to it.
medication, man. Who thinks about that when they're thinking about taking steroids? Oh, maybe I need some blood pressure
Exactly.
medication.
Exactly. Yeah, like how many naturals know their blood pressure to begin with? You know, I know when I was
Totally,
natural, I
totally.
maybe checked it when I went to the doctor. Like,
Right. And I recall a video you did not so long ago with Dr. Mike about what the pros are really doing and maybe not doing in regards to training and nutrition. I
that was a
love the
fun one.
video because man, when we look from the outside in social media, we only see the highlights, right? We only see the PRs, we only see them peeled, but we don't see all the unsexy stuff, all the health monitoring, all the expenses really, all the downsides in regards to personal relationships that maybe some people are not up to your bullshit when you're on drugs and whatever, and all that stuff that you mentioned that maybe the pros are not the ones we should be really looking what they do. Can we talk a little bit about that, man? Because I found it fascinating back when you uploaded that video.
Yeah, yeah. All pros that I know, uh, besides myself and maybe a few others who just don't trust anybody to do anything with them, have a coach.
Right.
And their coaches are generally the ones who know a bit more about this stuff. So that's cool. Um, but you're right. You're seeing the highlights. And I don't think I've talked to a single pro, like let's say in Dragon, that doesn't have some sort of long-term injury because they thought trim strength was actual strength and they hurt some joints or they had a pretty bad injury in the gym. Um, that's one thing that I really am happy that I get to share this sort of transitional phase with people, because I know what's stupid to do because I feel stronger due to some sort of uh, change in special support supplementation. It's like, okay, I'm on this now. I know that it promotes a lot of strength. So what I can do is load up 50 pounds more than last week and potentially hurt myself, because that's what most people do. You've seen
Yeah.
tons of tech pairs on like pec tears on like incline bench and shit like that.
Oh,
Or
nasty.
yeah, or I can stick with what I was doing in my logical progression scheme, stick to the sports science, and maybe just extend the mesocycle a couple weeks. If I was doing 225 on like a flat close grip bench or something for 10 reps, I introduced some sort of new supplements, quote unquote. And the next week, 225, felt like I could have done it for like fucking 20. Maybe just go up to 235, do 11 reps the next week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don't make drastic jumps in your weight on the bar just because you feel like you can. That's why people lead to like all these joint injuries. The joints don't the grow or recover or do these same things the muscles do when you introduce anabolics to them. They need time to catch up, and people don't really give them too much time. So that's why a lot of these guys I know have pretty severe joint issues, almost arthritic tendencies, and it sucks. Like their fingers hurt, their fucking elbows hurt all the time, and they're constantly training about it, or they're taking like TB500 or BPC 157, which are like peptides that help with recovery, and they like gotta constantly fucking shoot those. So then they're paying for more shit, and it's just like it just all compiles. So yeah, it's crazy. But listening to what the pros do, as in any field, as in any, just like with bodybuilding in general, a lot of these young kids, they look at people like us who are in academia, and for the longest time, they were like, yeah, but Ronnie Coleman has Mr. Olympia titles. And the people in academia are like, I don't give a fuck. I'm in academia. What do you mean? I don't care about his titles. I just know the science. I'm just trying to help you. Why are we arguing about this right now? It's the same way, it's the same fucking way. Like normally the guys who know the most about the pharmacology, people like Broderick competed at a very high level. And now he's, basically an educator. That's what he does. He educates people on the use of pharmacology, and then as Joe Jeffrey does as well, and John. And the cool thing about John is he's also a high level competitor, so he knows quite a bit, and he's high level. But it's more so sifting through the bullshit and trying to navigate. You're watching this. You're probably a pretty intelligent person. I know you're a professor, right?
Yeah. Works up.
So the people who follow you probably are pretty into academia, things like that. So if you're watching this, you probably have a pretty keen eye on bro talk, and if you ask somebody a question and their answer is it works for me, I got away from that shit a long time ago.
Yeah,
all right,
sure,
cool.
sure.
Whatever you say, man.
Yeah, that's why we listen to exercise science specialists, people that actually study research that all that stuff, man. Because you see it all the time. You see that the pros do it well. Maybe the pros don't even know what is training volume. To that extent, we can see crazy stuff like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is cool. So, like to the pros' benefits, they're where they are for a reason.
Sure.
They've gone through long careers, long careers of trial and error, figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and a lot of what they do is fucking right. A lot of what they do with pharmacology is right. A lot of those guys start off really low with like dosages and stuff, and they escalate. And a lot of them do know because of their coaches and because of just being in the community and talking to all the other pro bodybuilders, which they feel safe to talk to them because they're all in the same shit, doing the same stuff. They have learned quite a bit. I actually know a lot of pro bodybuilders are now taking like telmisartan for the angiotensin. It acts on the pathway for like basically what happens with cardiac hypertrophy, and it can somewhat mitigate some of those effects potentially. So a lot of them are taking that now because they understand that. And a lot of what they do is like, they're all talking to each other. So it is right at the same rate. I wouldn't be hopping on like a gram of tren because my favorite bodybuilder is a gram of tren. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
I painfully know what you mean, man. I see it all the time. Anyway, so to hop in on the other subject I wanted to discuss with you, because I insist I want to be respectful of your time. I don't want to be a pain, man. I don't want to be like emailing you and because I know how busy you are, man. So I really do appreciate it. I want to rate it.
No, it's all good. Yeah, it's all good.
Right, man. So exercise selection for hypertrophy, because it's a little bit tricky. And lately, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's been kind of a trend to, let's say, modify some exercises or maybe, I don't know, take a lot of variables into consideration.
Overly isolate exercises
Yeah,
that shouldn't be overly isolated, and try to target
right.
specific muscles with exercises that
Exactly,
you shouldn't try to target. No, I know what you're
exactly.
saying. Yeah. Yeah, it's very annoying.
But it's kind of cool because that's how we learn stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Um, so to that effect, I think a lot of those guys miss out on like the raw stimulus magnitude, which is basically like the mind muscle connection, the pump, the muscle disruption, the amount of growth stimulus any given training will actually generate for you basically is the raw stimulus magnitude of that specific exercise. That might be you feel a good pump and a lot of muscle disruption with like a deadlift. Okay. And the raw stimulus magnitude of that is probably pretty fucking high. That's a huge
sure.
stimulus. You're using a lot of muscles to move a lot of weight. So to taper down from that, what you want to try to find is the best stimulus to fatigue ratio, because the raw stimulus magnitude might cause quite a bit of fatigue, like deadlifts, for the muscle group you're trying to work. And I think a lot of these guys run into the issue of, okay, well, I feel this muscle, and they overly focus on the mind muscle connection, which is honestly, the eccentric phase of the lift produces a shitload of hypertrophy. If you got a pump in the muscle, fuck yeah. But when people are really like oh, squeeze that muscle, like the peak contraction on the end of the actual exercise is just excessively overly emphasized, and that's what a lot of these people are doing.
Totally.
So they're completely negating the stimulus magnitude, the raw stimulus magnitude, for like this mind muscle connection, and they're forgetting that the pump and the muscle disruption is also a part of that. But you want to find what is the best stimulus to fatigue ratio for that muscle, which is literally just that raw stimulus magnitude divided by the fatigue. And we have specific ways you can calculate the raw stimulus magnitude comparatively between exercises and the SSRs comparatively between exercises. If you just like go to the Renaissance Periodization Hypertrophy Hub, we have the equations in there. And that's for people who need it more like quantitative, written down at first. A lot of us do it qualitatively to begin with. Like, okay, I feel this in the target muscle. It feels fucking awesome. And the rest of my body doesn't feel fucked up from it. Like I feel my hamstrings are on fire from this exercise. So back to the deadlift example, maybe they're doing deadlifts. The deadlifts definitely hit the hamstrings and glutes a little bit. And that's why they're doing them still. But maybe a straight leg deadlift actually reduces that raw stimulus magnitude, and in return, the SFR goes up because now you're hitting the hamstrings with a straight leg deadlift. You're reducing the load on the bar, and you're using a really good, slow, eccentric, good technique, which then reduces the amount of fatigue. So now you can do straight legs for hamstrings, and you have room for other exercises because you're not systemically fucked up. Because the raw stimulus magnitude on super axial loaded exercises is generally pretty damn good,
Totally.
but it's also really going to fuck you up. So you got to
Systemically
think
fucked
about
up.
that.
That should be an academia term. If
Yeah.
you're currently systemically fucked up, man, you can bet I am. And that whole stimulus to fatigue ratio, which is also in the hypertrophy book, which
Yes.
I already read. Thanks a lot for such content. It's also
For sure.
highly individual, right? Can we
It's
talk a
what?
little bit about that? Individual.
Individual? Yeah. So first of all, I will say this. If you don't have, and this is why we preach full range of motion too. Again, the raw stimulus magnitude is going to be super fucking high, which means the fatigue is probably in return going to be super high on exercises where you use a lot of weight. So for people who quarter rep leg press, that's an excessive amount of fatigue, especially to the joints, for no fucking reason. Because fatigue is joint connective tissue disruption,
Right.
your perceived exertion, and the muscles around their unused muscles, that performance too. Like with the deadlift, fucking traps get messed up, your lower back gets messed up. You were trying to get bigger ass and hamstrings, and now everything else just hurts. Like your elbows hurt because you're holding on to it. So with the SFR, I highly want to emphasize this is why, like, yeah, we have this whole joke, team full range of motion, always go full range of motion, yada yada, and that is individualized for sure. But most people can move through more range of motion than they think they can. They just haven't been taught proper biomechanics, like maybe the angling out of the feet, opening the hips, and like squatting patterns, things of that nature. We all have different. We have different ankle mobility, different hip mobility. Um, we might be able to go lower on the pad, further out on the pad as far as the leg press goes. We might need wider stances in squats. We might need more narrow stances in squats. It's really up to that individual. But most people can move through a 4 range of motion and they're fine. But this is going to enhance the SFR, which is why the stimulus fatigue ratio is so important. If you're quarter repping leg presses, you're going to be systemically fatigued because you're probably using a lot more weight. The fatigue goes up. The joint connective tissue disruption is higher, and it will definitely make sure that your SFR goes down. So I could 12 plates per side quarter rep leg press if I wanted to, but instead I use 5 plates per side. I go all the way down, and my quads get blown the fuck up. And that's a really good exercise for me, SFR-wise. So a lot of people will say, this exercise doesn't feel good for me SFR-wise while using bad technique. Most of these exercises, to be honest, I'm not everybody's a special snowflake type of person. Most of the exercises that are good are fucking good. A straight leg deadlift is great, and you can touch the floor almost always. And I have this argument with so many people over the course of my career. It's ridiculous. It's all biomechanics and teaching that person the proper cues. Unless they're working around an injury, unless they are super, super long limb below the waist and not very long limbed above the waist, probably able to touch the floor, probably able to keep a nice lordotic neutral spine, and able to keep the big chest and push the hips back. So the exercises that are good are good. They're really fucking good. And you might have, you might calculate the raw stimulus magnitude of 2 sets of, let's say, leg press and the raw stimulus magnitude of 2 sets of squats, and they're very similar, but the SFR feels better on squats. Generally, the SFR might feel better on leg press for a lot of people, but maybe if someone gets a lot of lower back involvement in the leg press and they don't know how to fix that. So the squats have always felt better, and that's fine. Those 2 exercises are very similar, same as a hack squat, and it's up to you to find if that SFR is better for you in a specific exercise. I can tell you right now, a lot of people squat incorrectly. Most people squat incorrectly. No elevated foot. They don't point the toes out. They use a lot of lower back. When it gets hard, they don't keep a consistent technique. But those are the 2 most important things for really figuring out if the SFR for the exercise is good. Because somebody might say, my SFR for leg press is really good and it's shitty for squats. But then you show them how to keep the tension in the squats, and then you put them on a Smith machine, and they keep the tension in the quads really, really well. Well, now Smith machine feels better, or a regular squat feels better, because most people are not used to taking their quads to pretty close to failure on a squat. Everybody shoots their ass up. Everybody leans forward. It's like you get the shakes. The first couple times you do a squat correctly, you're getting the shakes. I fucking promise. Like, if you can keep that tension in the quads, it's happening. It's going to happen. It still happens to me sometimes. So it's like showing people proper technique and mechanics is very important for exercise selection. It's probably the most important thing. And if you can nail down really proper mechanics, like 90% of the way, and most of your exercises, you can then begin to progress from there. And, over time, if small modifications to technique occur to increase the SFR, because that is a component of SFR, the stimulus fatigue ratio is that technique. If small little things shift here and there, and it makes the SFR on the exercise better, like squats were really good for you, leg presses sucked because you had no idea how to leg press, then Team Full ROM, Mike and Jared come around, they put you on a video, and we're like, hey, do this, this, and this. And then all of a sudden, leg press is now better for you. It's like, oh, shit, how's that work? So it's all about, technique is probably the most important thing. So just making sure it's consistent technique and that. But if you want specific, quantitative, algorithmic ways to calculate these things, raw stimulus magnitude, stimulus fatigue ratio, We have those in our book. We have those free on the Hypertrophy Hub, and we have videos on it. Mike does a ton of videos on it. So look into them.
Right, man. And as you mentioned, maybe the whole team full ROM sometimes can be like a strawman. That always full
100%.
ROM in regards to everything. But I know that's not the point. That's not why you do it. Why
100%.
you mention it, why you name your brand team full ROM, right? But it can be. It can be. I wanted to ask you on regards of the range of motion. What are your thoughts on studies like, I'm sure you're familiar with it. I think it's Sato and colleagues that they show greater hypertrophy at long muscle lengths performing partial ranges of motion. But
Sure.
one of the key limitations of that particular study is that they compared short muscle lengths versus longer muscle lengths, but not the full range of motion. What are your current thoughts on partial range of motion? Only
My current
in yeah, go ahead, man.
no, only in what?
In long muscle lengths.
Yeah, so my current thoughts on any one study are stop looking at any one study.
Mm-hmm.
It's obnoxious. I like when people are like, "What about this now?" I'm like, have you seen the full body of literature? What about this
Yeah,
meta-analysis?
totally.
How do you like
Yeah,
that?
because there's several about that
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah, I feel you. That's fine. But it's funny because people use that as an argument, and then I'm like, okay, cool. So go through the full range of motion. Well, does saying that it's more stimulative at long lever lengths or muscle lengths, it's like it's okay, so you can still go through the full range of motion and you're
Right,
still
right.
doing that.
Sure.
Why load up extra weight, cause more systemic fatigue, reduce the SFR, reduce the raw stimulus, increase a shitload of fatigue, and then just to do this? Does it actually make sense to me? It makes no sense to me, to be honest. And we're noticing more and more in the literature that the eccentric component of lifting
Totally.
causes a fuckload of growth. So why are we just doing this? Because you read a study where it said, oh, that can produce more hypertrophy potentially. Okay, cool. So do this, plus this, plus this, plus this, plus this. Like just go through the full range of motion anyway. It's very funny when I get arguments like that. I'm like, okay, so that negates going through a full range of motion. Like I'm just confused at what you're trying to get across here. But yeah, so my current thoughts are when one study comes out saying one certain thing, take it with a grain of salt, look at all the meta-analyses around that specific topic, learn how to read data a little better. A lot of times these studies are flawed, the design sucks, etc. But then people use them.
They're untrained subjects, stuff like that.
Yeah, I believe there was a study done in Brazil potentially where it showed a ton of glute growth with squats, and then they realized the study
Okay.
design was flawed.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Which, squats do cause a lot of glute growth, but there are ways to modify it to make it even better. So yeah, well, any one study, don't go flaunting it too much on social media. You might be made out to look like a fool by the academics.
We all been there, man. But I think it's part of the whole learning process to fuck up from time to time, and maybe not hurt people in.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you also, Jared, almost to finish off, about the variation in exercise selection. What are the things you take into account from when it's necessary to change an exercise, to give it a little bit of variation, maybe also in perhaps in the range of motion situation? I know one key
Sure.
component should be the stimulus to fatigue ratio because that's dynamic, right? It's not like a static thing and never changes. But what do you
Yeah.
take into account for yourself or maybe your clients?
Sure. So I have a more strategic implementation, I think, than most people. A lot of times people are like, hey, you're progressing well on this, so just keep it in. I think that's all well and good, but at the same rate, I think that you should take into consideration the potential. It's kind of like with training volume. We take into consideration the potential adaptations and we make these volume increases intentionally. So it's probably a good idea. I make strategic implementations based on the fact that overuse injuries can occur, based on the fact that we may need novel stimulus in a diet, because when you get caught up in thinking about strength on an exercise, Not only does that drive a fucking client crazy, but there's going to be drop off due to a bunch of physiological factors that occur when you diet down, including the hypocaloric dieting, simulating AMPK, simulating all these changes in pathways. And people don't take any of this consideration. So whereas even Mike, I think his recommendations are a little bit different than mine, and his are fine too. And so are like 3DMJ's. 3DMJ has some really good recommendations on this too. I like to incorporate more variation in a prep. I still don't violate that directed adaptation because you do need to do things often and in sequence in order to get better at that. So maintaining muscle tissue, you don't just vary everything all the fucking time because then you violate directed adaptation and you potentially lose muscle. 4 to 6 weeks at a time, I keep an exercise in. If I'm massing, it might be more like 6 to 12 weeks at a time because I'm progressing really, really well with an exercise and I'm eating more food, I'm getting stronger, et cetera, et cetera. So the exercise, I plan on the exercise's performance to go up. In a diet, the novel stimulus might be a really good way to maintain muscle tissue. So I might keep in a variation for 4 to 6 weeks. And then the client goes through a deload process. And after that deload is when I would make the variations. Or if they have some sort of nagging, sort of like, oh, this hurts. Can we change it this week? Those type of auto-regulation things. So the auto-regulation is always a thing. Anything I tell you, there's always an auto-regulation component. Like, oh, this client is going to go up to 3 sets next week or here, 4 sets here. And then, oh, they can't because they were fucked up. There's always auto-regulation. So just adding those variations in deep into prep, and that can include the rep ranges. They can include adding in some intensity technique, some sort of like myo reps instead of regular straight sets on this exercise so that you can continue to get more reps, more effective reps on that exercise that you're really, really loving and jiving with because it causes a lot of low joint stress. But when you calculate the SFRs on specific exercises for you, it might be cool to maybe have like 2 to 3 exercises that are really good SFRs for you. So you can then go in and strategically make those variations later on down the line. So let's say leg press is the shit, hack squat's fucking awesome, and you love Smith squats. So you do some sort of hack squatting and Smith squatting and mesocycle 1. And now you're kind of like, oh, okay, I'm getting stale. My quote unquote strength is going down on it. So you swap out one of those for hack squats. And you vary the rep range on the other one to like 15 to 20 instead of 10 to 15. And maybe you do a fucking intensity technique. All this is a really great way to keep the volume high in the gym while you're dieting down and just make sure that you don't get overuse injuries. I'm a big overuse injury guy. I think the pronation and ankle change from like, let's say even just a close grip to a wide grip can limit a lot of the injuries that you're going to have. So I'm pretty big on that. I think Mike and 3DMJ and a few other people that are really, provide a lot of information for everybody. They're bigger components for like keeping the exercise as long as progressing, like even if it's like 5 pounds, whatever, which is cool. Cool. If you're experiencing no pain whatsoever, that's fine. And you're experiencing no joint stress whatsoever. Awesome. Just know and keep in mind that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes skulls feel really fucking good for me for like 6 weeks at a time. And then out of nowhere, it's like, oh, fuck, my elbow. What happened? So these things take time. Even overuse injuries take time.
Very well, man. So just to finish off, if you have the time, of course, could you give us a couple of key takeaways on one instance for young aspiring bodybuilders that are considering, as the first part of the talk was, steroid usage, that never competed, that are learning about training, about nutrition? Maybe some piece of advice for all those people. And then, of course, if you still have the time, a couple of key takeaways on exercise selection.
Yeah, key takeaways for the anabolics, man.
I know it's a tough one, man. I'm sorry for that.
No, it's good because there are a lot of takeaways. Everything we talked about is very important. So I'm sure this will be posted up. And please, for the love of God, just take the stuff into consideration. Learn about it first. Please learn about it first. I know you want it all now. Everybody wants it all now. Look at me. I'm 29 in like 5 days. Okay. I'm going to be 29. You're 18. You're 17. You're 16. Whatever. I didn't hop on until I was 25, 26. I'd already established a really good career in academia, a really good natural bodybuilding career. People looked to me for advice. It was really cool to be able to go through all these processes. And before I ever touched anything, I learned a bunch of shit. So if there's nobody in your ear telling you to wait, let that be us. Please wait.
Awesome.
Yeah. Because I had actually Israel, Mike was in my ear. There was one time in my master's program, I was like, I'm just ready. Like, fuck this. I'm ready to go. And I had learned a little bit about it, but I didn't learn enough. And looking back, I know that now. So, I had good mentor to tell me to just chill the fuck out. So, to those kids, try to wait. And if you don't want to wait, I highly encourage you to sign up for one of these member sites like Team Eagle GSP, Physique Collective, J3 University, just so you can see how much shit you don't fucking know. Because when you see that, it becomes overwhelming and you're like, okay, I'm probably not ready for this. It'd be like telling a kid fresh out of high school, all right, you ready for the PhD? Let's go. And the kid's like, what? I don't know any of this shit. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same thing. So I highly, highly encourage everybody to look towards coaches, look towards these people who are preaching about the safe for use models, and just really try to learn about stuff before you ever do it. Second takeaway is don't do it at all if it's not something that you see yourself doing long term. If you haven't trained for a long time, or if you have and you only want to do it just to better your life, there's really no point in doing the anabolics. Just keep going to the gym, keep enjoying your healthy lifestyle. And I know everybody wants to be leaner and more muscular, but I mean, sex appeal wise, that's one of the last things that fucking matters. Like, you can get lean and be fit and all that cool shit and just be a scumbag, people don't want to be with you then either. So it's, just be a good person. And if your main purpose for hopping on is just that you want to be the big guy in the gym, reconsider, fall in love with the process a little bit, and then
go to therapy, as you said.
100%. Therapy.
Yeah, man.
Therapy's good. Exercise selection, just I highly encourage everybody to check out either the book or the articles, and just understand that creating a really good stimulus with your current movements is the number one thing you want to focus on. Moving through a full range of motion, all things considered, if you can, and utilizing your biomechanics is the best way to increase stimulus to a target muscle. If you want to then figure out what exercises cause a shitload of fatigue for you and have a smaller SFR, you can look at those articles and stuff and figure that out. So they're very important. They help you quantify how to do that. But again, the first thing you have to do is utilize a fairly decent technique. Make sure that you're consistently using that technique. And I mean consistently through the entire set, consistently through the entire mesocycle, and consistently over time. And if one or two things change to help you get even better stimulus to the target muscle, that's fine. Like, you'll see people are like, what do you think about this guy who's saying this exercise is way better for the lats? Or what do you, like, Kassem's one of them. What do you think about Kassem's teaching, yada, yada? I'm like, my thing is sports science. Like, if this person tells me right now, like, hey, I really felt this grip that Kassem had me doing, and like my back feels awesome afterwards, I'm pretty fucking sore, I had a great pump, yada, 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 and they want to continue to utilize that isolation exercise later on in the exercise or later on in the workout for a while, whatever. Like, that exercise felt good for them. They really liked it. They enjoyed it.
Totally.
That's fucking cool. I love it. But you have to understand that I think it's pretty important to do like 80-20 heavy compound to isolation, as far as getting a pretty good raw stimulus magnitude, but also having a pretty good SFR. And a lot of those things are pretty isolated variations. So if you really want to look into that kind of stuff for like isolation variations and seeing how that how biomechanics kind of work and how you can change the angle of the arm to hit different part, whatever, like, check it out. But at the same rate, this is the bread and butter, heavy compound basics, and then you can sprinkle in some isolation shit. But yeah, so for exercise variation, just make sure you're using consistent technique. It's very important. And make sure that you can change the stimulus to fatigue ratio to make sure that the stimulus is very, very high. And usually that comes with, like I said, those technique modifications, utilizing a full range of motion, lowering the weight, making sure the tension's on the target tissue and not just all over. Like in a low bar squat, you might shoot your hips up first instead of keeping the tension in the quads. So you go to a high bar squat and you still have trouble keeping the tension in the quads. Just try to really utilize a good technique and maybe change the exercise if you can't.
Garrett, so then again, cannot thank you enough. It's been really, really a huge pleasure, really informative, and I really have high hopes that the first part of this conversation can help a lot of people. Of course, this will be posted. I will be doing a summary in Spanish for all my Latin peeps. So I want to thank you again for your really valuable time. It's been a huge pleasure, an honor, and anytime you want to come here in Mexico and train, you're more than welcome, man.
What part are you from?
What do you know? Because when I tell Michoacan, have you heard of it?
No.
It's like a state. Yeah, I knew it.
Okay.
I knew it.
Okay.
It's more so to the south, central south, more
Gotcha.
so. But anytime you want to come, you're more than welcome.
Hell yeah, man. Cool. I appreciate your patience. I know it took me
don't sweat it, man. I understand. I totally understand.
Yeah.
Don't worry, man.
Yeah.
Huge pleasure, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks again,
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. It was good.
Cool, man.
Good chat. Peace.